Good afternoon and welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you have joined me today. And we are still in this cold January, and we are going to go on a special journey together. Yes, somewhere that we all love. We're going to go to Paris. And we talked about the Orient Express, and we're going to be back on the Orient Express. But instead of coming from London to Paris, we're going to be traveling, 100 years ago, during the Russian Revolution. If people could just get to Vienna, they would be safe. And then they often went from Vienna to Paris, and then from Paris to London, and then often from London to America, or perhaps stay along the way. Well, when I was in Budapest, Hungary, I saw a little car. It looked so small compared to today's trains, but it was an original train car from the Orient Express. And it was sitting in a park as a museum piece. And it was perhaps the caboose or the engine, I don't know. It seemed like it was a front or a back car. I just was going by on a bus tour, and our French guide pointed that out to us. And, the Orient Express was a very important train. And way back when I started these tea talks, we did go on the Orient Express down to Istanbul, remember? And down to the Middle East and Cairo. Well, this lamp I showed you then, and I am going to show you now. This says Paris Orient Express Istanbul on the little green tag. Do you see? And of course it's a reproduction, but isn't it beautiful? I love the green. And I'm sitting at a desk that, if you could see, it has the green leather, the same color in it. And I have been served tea. Yes, my tea came right before you joined me. Yes, and it's got a special silver pot, and it has a lion on top, and there's a little creamer and sugar. And then it's late afternoon, and so, they brought me a biscuit. That's what we call cookies. They call biscuits. These are Scottish butter biscuits. And I am going to take my special cup. I love this cup. And I think it looks to me like what I think Paris 100 years ago was like. Black, pink, white, and gold. So often you see that Paris pink, and then it'll have touches of black and gold. Well, if you haven't gotten your tea yet, pause and get your tea, and I'll be waiting for you. Okay, here we go. Going to pour out. We're having a nice black tea. It's 4:00 afternoon. We're not having a high tea because there's going to be a fabulous dinner served on this train in a few hours. So the late afternoon tea was just to give you a little pick-me-up before you would perhaps be getting ready for a dinner. And we have a little candle here too. I'm going to put the candle on the tea tray. I just love a tea tray that has a candle on it. Let me show you. It just adds so much to it, doesn't it? You know, it's the little things in life that we have right in our own homes that make life so special. We don't have to wait for a special event. We can create the event. We are the event, and we invite others to be the event with us. Now, this is a special clock, and on it, I want to read to you what this clock says. It says, Grand Hotel by the Louvre, Paris, France. It's from the Grand Hotel, the Louvre. And see the back? And it actually has a battery operated. But I love the little tick-tick. It doesn't make a chime, but it just has, I put it right next to this. It sits here next to my Orient Express lamp. And I have it on my desk to inspire me. Yes. Now, let's try our tea. Okay. Isn't that delicious? Hot tea in the winter months in January has to be the epitome of tea. It warms you and refreshes you. This cup has such detail in it. Inside, I love when they put a beautiful symbol from it's that French romantic Viennese scene of the man and the lady sitting in the flower garden, and he's probably reading poetry to her. You know, since the beginning of time, romance makes the world go round, right? It still does. And no matter how young or how old, we all appreciate a good romantic story. And a story that has a good ending. Yes. And you know, the book that really has such a good ending is sorry, I don't know what that was about. I'm having Bach playing today. It's so beautiful. It's from the Anna Magdalena notebook. Anna Magdalena was Bach's second wife. His first wife died in the 1700s. The life expectancy was very short. And I think she had 5 or 6 children, and that was very sad for him. But he found consolation in his music and in God. Bach was a real Christian. And then he met a young woman named Anna Magdalena, and she was a singer in the choir, and they married, and they had 5 or 6 children. They had a huge family, and she was a wonderful musician. She helped him so much, and they all did music together, all the children, and he wrote a notebook for her called the Anna Magdalena Notebook, and that's what's playing today. And it is really romantic. He did it for her, and I think it was partially for her to learn more music. She was the singer, and maybe he was helping her with her keyboard skills. And there's a song in there that's going to come, and it says, oh, it's so beautiful. It says, if I can be near to you, everything will be all right. And that's Bach's heart. And so they had a wonderful family, and his sons, many of them became musicians in their own right. Johan Christenbach wrote the most gorgeous cello concerto, one of my favorites forever. And he contributed so much. And remember, we talked about Bach, that, if you sat at a desk like this, and that's where he sat to write his music, he didn't necessarily sit at the piano or the keyboard. In those days, a harpsichord. He would sit at a desk, and it was all in his head. He was a genius. And some people say it would take 80 years for someone to sit and copy all of his music. That's how involved and amazing his music was. He was rumbling it out daily, just so wonderful. Well, the reason I wanted to go to Paris today, the opposite way, I'll tell you where I really wanted us to imagine coming from. And that's why I'm wearing this fur today. Russia. Because St. Petersburg or Moscow did have trains that connected. They were not on the Orient Express, but they had trains that would connect with the Orient Express for those that could afford it. Well, before the Russian Revolution, I've talked about this lady before, but I think January is a month we need to revisit. And I am rereading her book. And this is her wonderful picture. Her name, Marie Avinov, Avinov, and I know some of you have read her wonderful book. This is her in her older years, after she came to America in the 1950s and was able to write her memoirs, which is nothing but an absolute miracle, because her story has moved my life. Really, I feel of all the books I've read in all my life, hers has to be top 5, in the top 5 category. I think about this book all the time. There's so much in it. And I've read it through 2 times, maybe 3. And each time it's like, oh my goodness, because I'm changing, I'm older, I get more out of it. It's a book like that. It's a classic. You can only get it online. Marie Avinov. And I think the title is actually something like Journey Through Hell, but Avinov. And she was a Russian aristocrat, born probably in the 1890s, late 1890s, because she was a young woman in her late teens, early 20s when the revolution happened. And she was living there, and she lives through it because her husband, Nicholas, a beautiful man from Kiev, Ukraine, was a geologist, and he was dedicated to helping Mother Russia, and he did not want to leave his country. Her whole family fled, his family fled, but he felt he should stay, and so she stayed with him alone. And the rest is history. And then, I don't want to ruin the book, he disappears, and she doesn't know all these years what happened to him. But she then lives through World War I, she lives through World War II, she lives through all the purges, she ends up as a political prisoner in jail. And one of the things that is so touching, her exuberance, her faith, her hope, her beauty of person. She had been trained by the best tutors. She spoke 4 to 5 languages. And she was a clever woman. She was a good woman. And the Russian government recognized that. And so they used her as a translator. And that's how she survived. But she ended up in a prison for a while. And do you know what she did? She told stories. And all the women, you had every level of society in this prison. Every level. She describes them, each one. And they couldn't wait till night came to hear the story. to hear her stories. She would tell them stories. And I don't know fully what all the stories were, but she was so well read. She had loved the German romantics, Schiller and Goethe, and she had had a German tutor who had helped her fall in love with that literature. And she used that intelligence she had to give life and creativity and beauty to others in the midst of squalor and hopelessness. She brought hope. And you know, that's what we can bring. We can bring light in the darkness just by a smile, just by a good word, just by encouraging others to be their best. And to know that God is alive. He's in heaven, and he's here with us, and he sends the Holy Spirit to be with us, to comfort us. And you know, one of the greatest lessons, I think, throughout all of Scripture is the analysis that we have a God that individually loves each of us. This is not a group. This is an individual love that he has for each of you and for me. And there's a verse in Jeremiah that is very special. And it has a Hebrew word, and I might not pronounce it right. I think it's Lombard. And it's only used in a few places for heart. And in the Hebrew, it is implying love God with all your heart. Now, I pondered that this week. My husband gave that in a sermon last Sunday. Love God with all your heart. And I started thinking, you know, I can't love God for you, and you can't love God for me. It's a choice. It's our own heart, individual. It's not a group. It's not a mass. And you know, even Jesus broke it down. He said, when they asked him, well, how many commandments are there? He said, well, you know, we can break it down to 2. They can all be summed up in 2. You know, Moses had 10, and then, you know, the Jews had hundreds of commandments. But he said, we'll break it down to 2. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy mind, soul, and strength. 2, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Simple. Ponder that, because I feel that's where the power is. That's where the energy is. That's where the joy is. Because we have the privilege of actually giving something back to God. And that is our heart. And trusting him with it. You know, Bach understood that. That's why I'm playing Bach today. Bach really understood that. You know, he said it's so important, and Martin Luther said this, for young children to sing songs of praise to God. It will keep their souls clean and let them feel their heart go to God. Isn't that beautiful? And actually, we're all children. Jesus called us, said we must become as little children to enter the kingdom. And you know, my favorite Christmas song, which I didn't get to sing this year, and I wanted to sing it so much, The Bleak Midwinter. It's my song. The last verse. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet, what can I give him? Give him my heart. Christina Rosetta, Rossetti wrote those words 100 years ago, and they mean more now than they ever did. I have one other little book that I found a couple of years ago. My husband and I and my daughter and son-in-law visited Powell's Books in Portland. Have you ever been there? Oh my. If you like books, you will love Powell's. And it's 4 floors. It takes up a complete city block. I never knew. I had heard about Powell's. And my son-in-law had told me almost every book you order on Amazon comes from Powell's. They have this treasure trove of vintage books, new books. Well, I went to the Russian section when I was there, and I found the most fabulous book that goes with my Marie Ivanov. And this book is called Memories of a Russian Lady, Drawings and Tales of Life Before the Revolution by Mariana Davydoff, and that's Davydoff. And this is the most fascinating book. It's a woman of the exact same era, exact same aristocracy as Marie Ivanov, and she had painted all the pictures of her family life before she left Russia. But they were all destroyed in the revolution, and she came here just by a miracle herself. And do you know what she did? She painted them all from memory, and that's what this book is. And it is so fascinating to me. And I haven't read the full book, but each page has a painting. This is all the script, and then you get into it. She has paintings of what her family did. There's the singing and dancing. And they had such a life of beauty. And I know in Marie Ivanov, they had tutors, and then in January, they started the ball season and would go to the homes, and they had, in Marie Ivanov's book and in this book, they had a priest that actually lived in their home and had a chapel. And Solzhenitsyn also had that. When he came to Vermont and built that fabulous house, he had a chapel and a Russian Orthodox priest. And the Russian Orthodox have a little service every evening at 5, even now. And I don't know how they did it all in their home, but this is all the paintings and pictures of their life and how they lived. And Maria von Trapp, when she and their family, Sound of Music, escaped and they came to Vermont, and they built that fabulous ski resort because poor Maria, in her innocence, she signed away all her book rights for just a pittance. And then they took and made the movie and did all of that, and she didn't get a dime. And so their family had to make money by singing. They had been aristocrats in Austria, but they lost everything. But she said she felt God allowed it so that they would work together. And they built in Stowe, Stowe, Vermont, this beautiful ski resort where people would come from all over the world. And the Von Trapp family ran it, and I believe they still run it, the 2nd or 3rd generation. But this is so phenomenal that she could remember. There's outside, and I don't know how difficult this book is to get, but there they are in the troika, in the snow. The troika is the little carriage, and then here's the Christmas. And it's just a really special treasure, and I felt like it goes right with, because I always felt in Marie Ivanov The one thing missing, there's the one picture of her when she comes to America, but there's no pictures of her family. And you get to know the family and you want to see them and what they look like. And her grandfather was personal friends with Tolstoy. He comes to the door in their house and knocks on, I believe it was New Year's Eve, and he wanted to read Matthew with him. Everything is, it's such a Christian world 100 years ago. People believed in God and they loved God. And Leo Tolstoy came and said, could we read the scriptures together? Well, her grandfather said, it's my custom to go to church with my grandchildren. So he had to take them in the carriage. And so I don't know what happened with Leo Tolstoy, but we can still have that Bible culture in our lives. We don't have to wait for others. We have more Bibles around us, more books around us, more classical music around us, more poetry. We all have phones, we all have computers. It's our choice. And, we don't want to be like people that are living in a field of apples and oranges and fruit and wheat and bread, and yet they don't pick it up. They're just starving. That's what it's like when we don't take our opportunity to partake of good things. And I wanted to just leave one thing with you for the new year. I got a new pen and I wanted to show you. It's a fountain pen to inspire me to write and to keep my journal. Whatever it takes, I also got a little new journal. And sometimes we need to get something like that to just help us on our way, right? Okay, I had with me this little purse on the Orient Express today because I thought it looked like going to Paris. Going and having a little tea on the Orient Express, and then looking forward to getting to Paris, where, of course, we're going to have a real fabulous high tea. Yes, we're going to do that. And the jewelry I'm wearing is a reproduction, and actually, it's a reproduction of Downton Abbey jewelry, believe it or not. And so it is the era. It's the 100 years ago era, right before the war. That period before 1914, called turn of the century, was a period when everyone thought everything was getting better and had no idea what was coming, through the wars. But people suffered, but people survived. And the people that survived helped others survive. And that's one of the keys. May you have the most fabulous week, and may your January be so special. I pray you will write poems. Who knows, maybe one of you is going to write a great book this year. Tell your own story. That's what people want to hear. Everyone has their own story. And it's not a bad idea to write it down. Do it for your children or your relatives. The best books were started that way. So many I could tell you I've read about, where people, like Carl Larsson in Sweden, all he did was paint his own family in his home. And now he is the most famous artist of Sweden. From 100 years ago, before there were cameras, he preserved all the beauty of life, just like this woman's book that she painted. There were not cameras around Russia in those days. She took it in and she painted it. Paint a picture, write a poem, and share it with someone else. And if all else, have a tea party. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a beautiful week. God hasn't changed. He's with you. He loves you. And He loves me. And we want to receive that love.